All right. So I went through a couple of like some research. I went through two, but I thought this one would be the most applicable. But it's also I chose this topic because of several things. So the I wanted to share and discuss natural environment teaching, and I picked a research article titled "Modified Incidental Teaching Sessions." Um, Positive for parents to increase spontaneous speech in their children with autism. So the reason why, again, I chose this is because it happens to be in alignment with my BST training on NET for the RBTs and candidate for my company's team meeting this month. But also, during my probes, I've noticed a lot of the therapists struggling a lot with NET and difficulty contriving opportunities in natural environment teaching. Um, but it's also with the line of work that we do, it's a doable practice for parents in using daily routines to teach man tacting and joint attention, because a lot of our parents, they just don't have time. Um, they don't have time. Sometimes it's hard for them to like allocate a time outside of routines to work with their kids. A lot of the time that I encounter parents, they have that barrier. So I think like what do parents go through every day is routines, right, with their kids. Um, Breakfast, dinner, brushing teeth, toileting, taking a bath, and even like getting ready for school, coming back from school. So utilizing those routines are, I guess, more doable for parents. It's also less costly, like with some parents that don't have a lot of funding or don't have the resources. They rely on training and themselves to do um, the teaching for their kids. And it also promotes the generalization of skills directly into, functional skills. Like it's meaningful for those children because it's what they will encounter on a daily basis. Um, so any questions before I move on?
Yeah, no, sounds good.
Okay, cool. So the modified incidental teaching session this research was published. This research was published in the Journal of Positive Behavior Intervention in spring 2000 by Marjorie H. Charlop Christie and Michael H. Carpenter. The research investigates the effectiveness of a hybrid approach between traditional incidental teaching and discrete trial teaching. Hence, you have the modified incidental teaching strategy. The purpose of the study, the research, is to increase spontaneous verbal speech, which includes manding or even tacting or any verbal interaction in children with their parents. Oh, sorry. All right. So in the study, they investigated three approaches, which is the traditional incidental teaching, the discrete trial teaching, and the modified incidental teaching sessions. So I just want to go through each of them in terms of the advantage and disadvantage. So with incidental teaching, it's a very good approach because when we teach the children in that context, they get in touch with the natural contingencies and the reinforcers, and plus it's something that's functional. It's also facilitates generalization, especially if it's also across different functional routines, environment, and so forth. The skills that are taught using in incidental teachings are functional skills. They're meaningful. However, the disadvantage is that because you wait for the opportunity, there's not much. So how many times of bathing can you have in a day? or how many times of uh, transition going to school. That only happens like once a day. So there's low opportunities when we use the traditional incidental teaching. Hence the learning rates tend to be slower than traditional DTT. And so in the DTT, there's many repetitions or opportunities for trials. Mass trial, we have 10 trials in a row, or we do like 20 or 50, or what have you, depending on what you want to teach. So we know that there's faster rate of learning because of these multiple trials, because they get a lot of practice using discrete trial teaching. However, the disadvantage is that the contingencies are not natural, and there's weaker generalization effects, and it's costly to conduct as well. Like again, parents don't have their time to set aside this teaching with their children, so they have to cough up some money or use fundings to recruit, like to have therapists, run the program for them. In the modified incidental teaching session, abbreviated MITS, the purpose is to combine the benefits of both the traditional incidental teaching and discrete trial teaching. So they're combining those two, looking at the advantage. So with this model, it's a child and adult initiated. There's contact with the natural contingencies and reinforcers. You can, instead of waiting for natural opportunities to happen, you can contrive that opportunities within the session, provided that motivation is still present and maintained. It also facilitates generalization, and again, skills are functional. So basically what it's talking about is that, so let's say, for example, like if a child wants snacks, how many opportunities can you get teaching snack after they come home from school? Especially if they're like different kind of snacks, you can create contingencies where you don't give them all at once, but then you give one cookie at a time, or a cookie and then an apple, or what have you, so that you can contrive that. In the modified and the MITS, you don't have to wait for a child to initiate as well, but you can initiate yourself. So for example, the parent can come over to the child and initiate, hey, it's snack time, do you want this or that? So it doesn't always have to be child initiated, but the adult can initiate the interaction. Any questions with the three models in this study, this research?
So far, it's good.
So far, so good. Let me know if I'm unclear. Right. So in this research, there are 3 participants. All of them are boys, age 6.2, 9.8, and 6. They were chosen in the study because they rarely or they never displayed spontaneous speech. The setting of the study takes place in the home of the children. So, and in their routines as well. So, for example, several locations in the home where it took place, the teaching took place, was in the kitchen, the bedroom, the living room, and the bathroom. That's for the incidental teaching and the MITS. However, for the discrete trial teaching, it's still in the home, but there's a specific location chosen by the parents where they do a sit-down teaching with mass trials. The design in the study is an alternative treatment design plus a multiple baseline design. So In the baseline, it's around 7 to 37 days. And during that time, parents record instances of spontaneous speech. And then they compare the three treatment conditions, the ones that we talked about. And for each treatment, there's 1 week of implementation. They randomize the order of the treatment differently for each child. So let's say, for example, with Ron, he could have the MITS first, and then the DTT, and then the incidental teaching, whereas Andy could have the DTT first, and then incidental teaching, and then MITS. So it's randomized differently for each child. And then there's also reversal to baseline before each week of treatment to assess any carryover effects. So say, for example, from MITS, and then the study is going to start with the DTT, but they do a baseline before they start the DTT. So before every treatment. The dependent variable in the study is the spontaneous speech. So for Ron, it's good morning in the incidental teaching, and how are you in the discrete trial teaching, and give me an item in the MITS. For Andy, it's food in the DTT, and then give in the IT condition, and out in the MITS. And then for Brad, the target is to say hello in the incidental teaching condition, and go bathroom in the MITS, and give me an object in the DTT condition. What's measured in the research is the spontaneous speech produced by these children, imitation or repetition of the target word phrase. So if, let's say, for example, the parent said cookie, and the child responds cookie, then they record it as an imitation, but not as a spontaneous speech. Incorrect responses are responses that are not relevant to the context. The independent variables are, again, the three conditions: the MITS, DTT, and incidental teaching. All right, so moving on to the procedure. So in the study, they first conduct the baseline. They use micro cassette recorders to obtain recordings of the child's speech, and the parents hid them in their pocket or somewhere where the children can't see it. Parents are expected to record 20 seconds of the child using speech spontaneously, or in that interaction, just the parents just to commonly or usually how they interact with their child in order for them to make a request. So they could be recording the parents utilizing prompts if they have been doing so in the past, or modeling the response, or any reinforcement and other procedures they've used. In the incidental teaching conditions, they record one naturally occurring interaction in the baseline, so just one time, which consists of the 20 seconds. In the MITS, they record 2 naturally occurring opportunities, and in the DTT, it's a sit-down session with 10 mass trials per day. Following the baseline, parents were trained to implement the traditional incidental teaching, the DTT, and MITS. They used BST, that consists of the instruction, model, and feedback, to train the parents. And within the training, parents were given examples and definitions of the 3 treatment conditions, what a time delay is, and gave an example of it. They talked about what spontaneous speech looked like, and imitative speech, and what the correct incorrect response is or what they look like. For parents to pass the training, it's the correct implementation on 5 consecutive trials. Sorry. In the modified incident, in the procedures for all 3, when the parents conduct the teaching, they first wait for the child to initiate. Then they provided a time delay of 10 seconds. And within the 10 seconds, if there's a spontaneous response from the child is given praise and access to the item or activity, or what is that they're requesting. When an inappropriate response occur, parents prompt the child, and contingent on the appropriate response, they get praise and access as well. The imitative response, when the child imitates the parents correctly, they get a praise and access as well. However, if incorrect responses occur, no praise was given and no access was given. So the protocol is run again in the, it's run once in the incidental teaching, run twice in the MITS, and then 10 trials in the, sorry, not BTT, but DTT procedures. Any questions?
No questions.
Hold on one sec. Sorry, you guys are going to see the screen. Are you okay with this? Yeah, okay. Did you guys have a question? No? Okay. All right, so what's the result of the research or the study? So in the baseline condition, all 3 children did not use any spontaneous speech. However, after treatment, 1 participant met criterion with the incidental teaching, 2 participant met criterion with the DTT. However, all 3 children met criterion with the MITS, and the generalization occurred for all 3 children in the MITS condition. So what I'm going to do is I'll just talk independently on the result. There's graph in the towards the end, so you can take a look at that as well. So the first participant, Ron, in the IT or incidental teaching condition, he's taught to say good morning. He didn't reach criterion in the for this. And then there's no generalization and there's no carry over effects. In the DTT condition, he was taught to say, how are you? He met criterion for this. However, there's no generalization and no carryover effects. In the MITS, he was taught to say, give me the item or activity, what have you. He's met criterion and generalization occurred as well for Ron. For Andy, in the discrete trial condition, he was taught to say food, but there wasn't any spontaneous vocalization in the DTT condition for Andy, and there's no generalization. In the incidental teaching condition, he was taught to say give. He met criterion, but no generalization. In the MITS, he was taught to say out. He met criterion, so there was spontaneous vocalization, and generalization also occurred after the teaching period. For Brad, in the IT condition, hello was the target, which he did not meet criterion and no generalization. in the MITS, he was taught to say go bathroom, which he met criterion and generalization occurred. And in the DTT condition, the target behavior was to say, give me the item or activity. He met criterion, but there wasn't any generalization after the teaching procedures or the teaching period. So this is the table from the research article. What it is just the data based off of the result that we just previously discussed. So the plus means that the children had met criterion in the conditions, and like an O with a slash did not meet criterion, and yeah, and then so you can on the top there you can see their names and then the condition that they went through. This is the graph that's more specific to the summary result above that we discussed. This one's for Ron. So as you can see with the MITS, so like the black circle is the imitative response, whereas the square ones, the black square ones, are the spontaneous speech. So we can see, like in the MITS, that the imitative are lower, but the spontaneous is increasing, and especially that it's after in the generalization phase, Ron had demonstrated the spontaneous speech in the MITS. Any questions?
Yes, I had a question.
Mhm.
I was wondering about the choice of targets for each of the children in the study. I thought it was interesting that for Ron, they chose, I think it was good morning and how are you?
Mhm.
And he did not meet criterion for those two targets. But then for the last one,
Mhm.
it was a man. So I was just thinking that for almost all demands that were taught across all three children,
Mhm.
the criteria was met. But when
Mhm.
the selected target was not a man, but a different verbal operant, they
Mhm.
did not meet the criteria. I don't know. I thought like that has to do something with how motivated the child was to acquire the skill.
I think that's why I think that's why MAND is the first thing that we teach kids,
Yeah.
because it directly benefits them. So like when you say like good morning, hello, those are how meaningful. It depends, because like if you have children with motivation for social acknowledgement,
Mm-hmm.
those would be meaningful. But we do know that our kids on the spectrum, um it's a struggle for them to have that
Yeah.
social motivation. However, the reason why that they were chosen, it was upon the parents' request. So
Okay.
the targets were not selected by researchers, but the
Mm-hmm.
parents were the one that
Yeah.
selected that. And a lot of our parents want, I think, like sometimes for them, that social commenting, that social language is important, rather than they overlook the man.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's a good that's good that you notices that, and I think
Yeah.
that's very valid as well. So thank you so much for pointing
Sure.
that out. Very interesting. Um, okay, can I move on, or are we okay?
Yeah. Yeah. Let's move on.
Cool.
Thank you.
No worries. And then this one's for Andy. As you can see as well, like there's better responses in the MITS compared to the other two. Some of them are actually like variable, like it's really not clear cut. Um, and then this one is for Brad, the last participant. So if you can see in the middle there, um, there's a there's more imitation, but then towards the end, um, the spontaneous increased, and then the imitation was lower. In the discrete trial, however, if you look at it, there's more spontaneous speech in the DTT. But if you look at the generalization part, there wasn't any generalization, although during the teaching, there were higher spontaneous responses, verbal speech, but it failed to produce those speech in the generalization condition. Whereas in the, I think like with the MITS, like I think it's the last block there, the last session, where you see the generalization and where I guess you start seeing that spontaneous speech occurring. But in the sessions before, there was a lot of more imitation. So what's the take home with this? So the conclusion is one is stronger acquisition and generalization of target speech during MITS may be due to the combined aspects of the incidental teaching and the discrete trial teaching. So I guess like why I think this is a good research is that as practitioner, maybe we need to think about combining strategies from different procedures that we know to reap positive outcomes. So sometimes, I guess not to take a cookie cutter approach. Like say sometimes, there's like procedures for running this, procedures for backward chaining, procedures for a forward chaining, or what have you, or tact or intraverbal. But we know that our kids are very unique and different, and sometimes their mind work differently. Their learning can be different as well. So it's good, I think, to look at strategies and start combining them. Like say, for example, like with like say simple thing like a backward chaining procedure. We know that in the books they say that the um, the adult or the therapist would do all the steps for the child, and then the child does the last. But then sometimes I feel like, well, that's a loss of opportunities because the child one has to be interested in what you're doing. So what if we just prompt the child through all of it and then fade out the prompts, the backward chaining prompts from the last. So we're prompting, but we're letting go from the bottom, from the last step to the second to third last. So I think like with this research, I think we should kind of like sometimes think out of the box also on what to implement with our kids. Because again, like I guess we're more in the real world, right? The other thing also with this research is that I think some of the models might be doable for parents. So if we are, let's say, for example, teaching parents to increase manding, um, and then teach them maybe like, okay, what does the child ask for a lot? Oh, when he comes home or when he's taking a bath, he's asking for he wants to do bubble baths. Oh, okay. And he likes the bubbles to like be overflowed. Okay, so why don't that be the teaching the training and the context and for the parents to work on, so that way they're not also overwhelmed. And again, also using that routine by considering the MITS. It's not just, oh, child says bubbles and you dump the whole bubble in there, but maybe teach parents to also just like, what are the things they can ask for more? So don't dump the whole bubble in there. Or you can, what goes with bubbles? Like maybe the child might like a rubber ducky or a boat or something. So again, I think I find that it's very doable for parents to do this. So that's why I think that this research is quite good, quite interesting. Very simple, but very practical. Any questions? Okay, how do I stop recording? Oh, here we go. All right, cool. So what do you guys think about it? It's very simple. I mean, we may have already done it ourselves, but I think it's just taking another step to thinking about combining things if you guys have like, you know, procedures.
Yeah, I like it. It's like you said, it is very simple. So, and um, I think what I like the most about it is your take-home message at the end, that it's not just about this particular procedure or about this particular study. It's about the concept of combining things, like being creative with our approaches and not sticking to one format of doing things.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it is kind of like you said again, something we probably have done before. But it's really, really nice how they've done it across the three conditions with the three children to compare results. I thought that was very interesting the way they've done it.
It's very well thought of, I think. And yeah, I was also surprised when I was reading the research like about the, you know, good morning and things like that. Because the first thing that I thought it was like it's like automatic, at least it's manding. But apparently, like when I read back again, no, it's not manding. It's any speech. So but you know what's funny though? Um one of the procedures in the DTT was that um so if an error occurred, they would model, but because like again, how they modeled it, they used dolls to model the response. So I was like, okay, I don't know. It's quite interesting. I've never tried that before.
Yes, this reminds me. I also had a question, and I don't know if you have the answer or not, but I remember for the second child you showed the slide for,
Uh-huh.
his DTT response was food. Do you know if that was a NAND or a different, like attacked?
Hold on one
Did they
second.
mention what
Uh,
kind of what verbal operant it was under? Because he did not meet the criteria, and I thought, for sure if it was a NAND, he would have.
for the second child,
Yeah, I think it was food under DCT.
the DTT's food. Yeah,
Yeah. Did they mention whether it was a NAND or attacked or
they didn't. They only
no?
mentioned like
Okay.
yeah, but I
Mm.
think looking at it, I think only one second. Most of them are all manned. Here, let me just share the screen again. One second. So if you look at Ron, the first participant, the good morning, the how are you are all social. Um, like how are you is a manned, it's manding for information, but again, you really have to have a very um strong social drive for that, or even the good morning. Maybe good morning, like I think it's potentially could be an indirect man for attention, like like say for example, when you say good morning to mom, says good morning back, or maybe gives you a hug, or there's things that lead to that. But however, they're very high in the hierarchy, I think. Whereas the give me is very simple. It's a direct, it's tangible. And And with the second one, this is more like all three of them appears to be more manned. Um, I think it's, I guess, so like they did say in the protocol that when the spontaneous speech occur, they provide praise and access. So the food, based on that, I'm assuming the food is a manned. Um, with
Yeah,
Ron,
that makes sense. Yeah.
yeah, with Ron, the good morning is, I think it's followed by a request. So I think good, say if the child says good morning back, and then he says like video game or something like that, then he gets access to the video game. So I think like with the first one, if I'm not mistaken, the research it's followed by a tangible. But they didn't explain much on the how are you one.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the last participant is also um it's a man for the MITS and DT is very clear. However, the in the incidental teaching the hello, it's more like attention. But again, has to have social drive for that.
As you said, we might probably be doing it. It's just that we never realized that we are doing it in a modified version. Like, for example, with one of my client, we have taught intraverbal. Who is it? Doctor? Where does he work? Hospital? Who do you go to when you're sick? All this in different operands or different categories of who, where, what.
Mhm.
But he wasn't able to generalize what is who. It was basically rote learn, memorized under DTT. So what we had to do was include it in a manting session where the kid loves alphabets. So I took the puzzles, alphabet puzzles, and I would make it a clue game. For example, um, this letter starts with this letter is for like igloo. So he has to say it's I, and he gets the I. So and I would start giving a really hard one. So he's like, what is it? So the question, what was taught that way? And I would at times it's like I would hide it and be like, where is it? So it would be like, oh, go check under in. So I was able to tackle the other operants also, like in on, not operants, I mean other teaching objectives as well, in on under, through this method. So and I made sure that everything was hit at least 5 times. So a combination of DTT plus NAT, which happened, as you said, I never knew there was a term for it, but knowingly or unknowingly, we ended up doing it.
Yeah, it's really important. Like all our everybody is different, and then they also the way that the capacity of learning is different. So some children may need a discrete trial, need to start off with a discrete trial, but we always have to remember that in a discrete trial teaching, we've got to generalize that into the NET. So when I was in Singapore, actually, they really have a very nice system for intensive programs. So like most of our kids, they start off with the DTT, which is the mass trial, random rotation. But as soon as they acquire about like 10, we moved it to a semi DTT, I guess. So it's not at the table, it's on the floor, it could be anywhere. And then we use mixed trials rather than, so we're mixing across different operants. And then once they pass that phase, and again, this judgment based on the behavior analyst or the consultant, then you start implementing that in that routine. So let's say, for example, if they learn how to tack bag, then they need to like in when they come in to the center and they put their bags in the cubby, right? So that's an opportunity to tact, right? So that's then so they have that really nice procedure. But it's also good to consider like moving with the best judgment. Like every child is different, but lingering too much in a DTT program, we can create rote learning, like you said, Stella. Um, and then they're so used to it. It's so predictable because we're also teaching per category. So if we're teaching tact, we're only teaching tact. And then they can predict what we're going to ask. And then we move on to action. So, or we move on to receptive, and then they memorize that. But in the middle, the semi DTT one, the mixed trial ones, it's good because they have to really listen, because I could be asking, what is this? Okay, find something that says moo. Okay, good. And what's your name? So it's still not contextual naturally, but it teaches a child to listen, because like, I guess in real life, information or conversation is not always one way. It can always change. So I think it's the shift in the verbal operants is quite nice in that particular stage, or maybe even group them based on context. So cool. Anything else?
Yeah, for me, like Amna and Stella said, it was really interesting to actually know that what we are doing, and though we did not know the term, it's like something that can be found effective through experiment. And when we explain these with the parents also, I think it would be more persuasive because we have like a um, concrete evidence that it actually works in both ways. And so if we combine them, we can get a better result. So I think it can be a good way to talk them through, to actually, yeah, make them do it more at home using these ways.
Yeah.
And also, I had like one thing that was kind of surprising was that the incidental teaching, though using mans, it wasn't really it in this study. It wasn't really as effective as the one with the modified one.
Mhm.
So, but as far as I knew before, like incidental teaching should be like with using the motives and everything. So I thought they would learn faster and could maybe generalize because it had a very big impact on their consequences, like it was reinforced. But maybe that also has like some difference with all the kids that we are meeting. So it's based on the individual differences also. So
It is. It's quite interesting because, like, again, like, with more repetition, we retain better, right? We learn faster when
mhm,
there's more opportunity. So they were referring to the traditional one, which is like, and we know, like, again, some opportunities don't come frequently, but they don't contrive it. So that's what they mean by that. But however, it's really funny because, like, some of my kids, um, they get bored really fast with,
yeah.
yeah. So um I guess, like, if you have an intensive session, like intensive therapy, where the child gets like, what, 10 hours of therapy, like comes every day to the clinic or have contact, I think, like, although per day the opportunity may not arise a lot, but across the week he's having that, the child is getting that exposure. Whereas in studies, how it was only a week,
Hmm.
so it's not, I guess you'd have to look longer than that,
Oh
I think.
yeah.
Yeah, but that's a funny thing also, because, like, we have targets per sessions, and we had mentioned to therapists, like, if you are running an NET program, it's going to be lower because of the opportunities. But I said, like, but don't wait for it. You need to contrive it sometimes, don't wait and linger and, oh, it's not coming, where's the opportunity, not coming. Well, then just make it happen, as long as it's logical, makes sense, and contextual. So again, that's why I'm like looking at this research and then, you know,
Yeah.
and again, having having a research to back up what you're trying to communicate is kind of nice because like, hey, here's
Mhm.
evidence, you know.
Yeah, I think it's always nice, like, because parents and even the therapists, newbies would love to hear more about the evidence that we're talking about. So I think it's good. And this reminded me of the early start Denver model because it kind of contrives more opportunities for the kids to communicate. So I think this is the one that is using the modified version of incidental teaching.
Yeah.
Mm.
And again, like you guys may have combined or modified your teaching, and that could be valuable for us as well as practitioners because we may have similar clients that, oh yeah, that might work with my clients. So I think like I would encourage you know, to kind of like look at things and then see if combinations of things can work out, because sometimes being stuck with one procedure is not, I'm not getting anywhere with this, you know, what do I need to modify, you know? So I think like sometimes when you have other people's brain, it's kind of like oh, okay, I'm borrowing ideas from Ji-un or from Amna or from Stella. Yeah, so that would be really nice as well.